Hi everybody, and welcome to another video lecture which introduces you to more terminology you can use to describe where a plant's native to. You've already learned what the general definition of a California native plant is, but California and floristic provinces are large areas, and no plant species grows absolutely everywhere. So it can be useful to use additional terminology to describe more accurately where a plant grows natively. From a horticultural perspective, knowing exactly where plants grow natively can be really useful because it helps us select plants that will thrive in cultivated landscapes by matching their natural cultural requirements with the conditions at a planting site. So let's get started. One of the ways in which you can be more specific about where a plant grows natively is by referring to its geographic distribution or range. This can be defined very simply as the geographic area or areas in which a plant grows naturally. The extent of plants' distributions can vary widely between species and even between intraspecific taxa. Some have a very broad distribution while others have a very narrow distribution. Plants with a broad distribution grow naturally in many places across a given area. This area may be relatively small, or it may be across more than one continent. For example, two plants that are native to the California floristic province and are frequently used in cultivated landscapes in California are the herbaceous perennial common yarrow that you can see in the inset photo here, and the grass creeping red fescue, which you can see in the main photo planted as a naturalistic meadow at a residential property near Cabrillo. Both these plants are also native to other floristic regions in North America and Europe. Therefore, you can describe these plants as having a very broad range. Usually, you also state what the range is. For example, for common yarrow and red fescue, you'd say that they both have a broad distribution across the Northern Hemisphere. In contrast, some plants have a very narrow or restricted range or distribution, meaning they only grow in a relatively small area. An example of a plant with a narrow distribution is Cleveland sage, which is a popular California native shrub for ornamental landscapes. On the right, you can see a small photo of the flowers of Cleveland sage, and the orange and yellow shaded areas on the map show the distribution of this shrub, which you can see is limited in California to just a relatively small area in the southwest of the state. The distribution of Cleveland sage also extends into Baja California, but that's not shown on this map. In addition to describing what a plant's native distribution is, it's common practice to also describe the type of habitat in which a plant grows. Habitat refers to the combination of abiotic and biotic conditions in which organisms exist naturally. For example, in the book California Native Plants for the Garden, the authors very briefly summarize the natural habitat of Cleveland sage as dry slopes in coastal scrub and chaparral below 3,000 feet. From a horticultural point of view, knowing what type of habitat a plant grows in naturally gives us some good information about the conditions a plant is likely to thrive in a cultivated landscape. The photo shows Cleveland sage in its typical native habitat. You can see that the shrub is growing in full sun in soil that looks very rocky and sandy, which we can assume drains very freely and is probably fairly low in nutrients, especially nitrogen. And these are the conditions in which Cleveland sage would thrive in somebody's garden. Endemic is another term you can use to qualify the distribution of a plant. Endemic means that an organism only occurs naturally in the location you're describing and nowhere else in the world. For example, you could describe the common yarrow and red fescue I mentioned earlier as both being endemic to the Northern Hemisphere. When the term's used to describe plants with a narrow distribution, it usually implies some degree of rarity. For example, here are the flowers and foliage of the evergreen shrub Pajaro manzanita, Arctostaphylos pajaroensis, which is endemic to a small area of northern Monterey County near Prunedale. This is the only place in the world that this shrub grows in the wild. You can use endemic as both an adjective or a noun. For example, you could say that silverleaf manzanita, Arctostaphylos sylvicola, which you can see in the photo, is endemic to the Sandhills plant community in Santa Cruz County. Or you could say silverleaf manzanita is a local endemic. Using earlier terminology, you could also describe silverleaf manzanita as having a narrow distribution in Santa Cruz County that's restricted to the Sandhills plant community. And here's the map from the CalFlora website that shows silverleaf manzanita's restricted range in yellow. One more term you can use to qualify the nativity of a plant is provenance. Similar to the term native, provenance refers to where something is from. In ecology and habitat revegetation work, provenance is usually used in a very specific way. For example, let's say you're working on a revegetation project in the Watsonville Slough system. The city of Watsonville might specify that not only do they want all the new plants in the project to be native to the Watsonville area, they may also specify that the provenance of the plants should be the same watershed as the project site. What this means is that the seed and cuttings the plants are grown from need to be collected from naturally occurring plants within that watershed. Not many home gardeners or commercial landscapers request this, but almost all revegetation and habitat restoration projects are very specific about the provenance of plants. There are two main reasons for this. One is to protect the genetic integrity of local native plant populations by not contaminating the local gene pool with genes from populations in other areas. And secondly, plants with a local provenance are adapted to local soil and climate conditions and are therefore more likely to thrive, both in terms of their growth and, importantly, their phenology. There are many resources you can use to research a plant's natural distribution and the habitat it grows in, and some of the most commonly used ones for California natives are listed here. There's a unit in Canvas which describes some of these most commonly used resources in more detail, and you'll have the opportunity to put them into practice in an upcoming lab. So let's finish now by quickly summarizing this video lecture. You've learned that the geographic or natural distribution or range of a plant or other organism describes the area in which it occurs naturally. Habitat refers to the combination of abiotic and biotic conditions in which organisms exist naturally. You've also learned that endemic means that an organism only occurs in the area being described and nowhere else in the world. And lastly, provenance usually refers to the original origin of a plant and is often applied to seed or cuttings that plants for revegetation projects are grown from. Thanks for listening. Take a break now or head back to Canvas to continue with this module.